The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Julia Talbot at the Department of Family and Support Services, and you are joining us for the Summer Youth Employment Program RFP webinar, the best 2 hours of your week. Joining me will be Lisa Davis and Evelyn Benitez of our youth unit. They will be going over the fabulousness that is the Summer Youth Employment Program, the one, the only. And I will be chiming in towards the end of their presentation to talk about the fantastic e-procurement system and how to make your application in that environment. I am working on, for a little bit of housekeeping due to the volume of participants. Everybody's on mute. If you have questions, please put them in the question box and we will be answering them at the end of the presentation. Some of the low-hanging fruit, sometimes I know Evelyn will chime in and do some answering, or Lisa, whoever isn't speaking, can do some answering. But we hope to go through all of the questions just so that you know, and I will repeat this for latecomers, this webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on the YouTube channel, and a link to that will be posted on the DFSS website. The PowerPoint will also be posted on the DFSS website. All of the questions and their answers will be written up as an amendment document and posted on the e-procurement application website, so that there is nothing here that you will not be able to access later. If you're having any technical issues, please put that in the question and answer section. And now we're just going to go on with the show. Oops, look at that. So I have a very cranky PowerPoint. So here we are. I'm going to turn this over now to Lisa Davis so that she can talk to you about the Summer Youth Employment Program. And again, thank you so much for coming. Lisa?
Actually, it'll be Evelyn Benitez.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
No worries. Lisa Davis.
Change up on me.
We are doing a change up. So good afternoon, everyone. It is 2022. Happy New Year. It is Evelyn Benitez, Youth Services Coordinator with the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services from the Youth Division team, assigned to the Youth Employment team under the fabulousness, and I love that you used fabulous earlier, Julia, leadership of Lisa Davis, our Director of One Summer Chicago / Youth Employment / all the extraordinary programs out of DFSS. Lisa Davis.
Sorry. Hello, all. Hi. I'm Lisa Davis. I am here in the background assisting Evelyn Benitez, and hopefully I will be able to get to the question that you put in the chat, and she is presenting today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Davis. And so some of you were on the webinar this morning for the Chicago Youth Service Corps. So now I will take it away with Summer Youth Employment Program. And just to let you know, the agenda is up. And so we will discuss the purpose of this RFP, give you some background, which we're quite excited to announce a couple of things that have come down the pipeline in terms of Summer Youth Employment Program. We will give you some information about the scope and the program description of this RFP. We will share the selection criteria, provide guidance on the timeline, and talk about the technical assistance and application process through our e-procurement system. And we are grateful to have Julia with us, who will cover that later on in the presentation. And then, of course, feel free to drop in questions in the chat, and we will answer questions after the presentation. Next slide, please. So what are we here for today? Today is the Summer Youth Employment Program RFP. We are seeking to fund agencies that have experience in implementing subsidized youth employment programs, internships, or specialized training programs for young people ages 16 to 24 in Chicago. The Summer Youth Employment Program seeks to provide youth employment to young people by exposing them to various public and private sector industries, employment placement, building financial capabilities, and trainings to help young people increase their self-efficacy and gain work experiences and skills needed to succeed in today's and future economy. Ultimately, we are seeking to increase young people's income and develop their 21st century skills. Next slide. And just to talk a little bit more about what we're truly looking for, the goal of the Summer Youth Employment Program is seeking to provide youth employment or specialized training programs to Chicago's youth ages 16 to 24 by exposing them to various public and private sector industries, job placement, building financial capability, and training to help young people. I feel like I already read that line, so sorry about that. Next slide. There we go. Now giving you some background. So many years, the City of Chicago, through the Department of Family and Support Services, has operated a summer youth employment program through procuring contracts with nonprofit agencies in Chicago. So many of you who are on this call have been a delegate agency through the department. And so as we are now in fiscal year 2022, we are looking for delegate agencies for this summer. And just a side note, and part of the exciting announcement, many of you had reached out asking, well, I see this is the SYEP RFP, where is OSC Plus? Well, after a few years of operating both programs, we have consolidated both OSC Plus and SYEP. So this is why you don't see an OSC Plus RFP. SYEP is capturing both OSC Plus and SYEP. So we want to make sure that we are serving young people ages 16 to 24. And just to give you some current data about the program the last couple of years, in 2020 and 21, One Summer Chicago Youth Employment Program served 20,498 and 21,748 youth, respectively. And take a moment to let that dive in, because we were dealing with a pandemic and we continue to deal with a pandemic. We were able to have youth participants accomplish 1,279,372 hours of work in 2020 and accomplish 1,299,938 hours of work in 2021, helping youth gain meaningful work experience and build strong communities during COVID-19. Through supporting diverse career pathways, DFSS funded agencies and OSC partners provided 1,013 work sites. Out of 8,187 youth surveyed in 2021, 83% discovered career pathways aligned to their life goals. Together, DFSS's One Summer Chicago programs provided youth with opportunities that broaden their perspectives and influence change in how they see themselves, the field of work, and career paths available to them and their goals in the future. So priorities that we've been thinking about as we continue to develop programs, the next 5 bullets, basically we're looking to fund delegate agencies that have the capability of matching youth. And so part of the priorities that we're looking at is to improve matching of youth to employment opportunities based on interests and skills. We're looking at strength-based approach to working with youth. We're looking to prioritize our enrollment of at-risk youth through the online application and utilizing a standardized assessment tool. We're looking to connecting the summer programming to other educational, employment, and youth development services that span beyond the summer months. And just to be clear, this is a 6-week program, but we're really looking at Summer Youth Employment Program as a way to incubate young people's skills and really guide them to think about their careers and future pathways. And lastly, we want to build young people's financial capabilities. Next slide. Target population. The target population that we're seeking to serve in the Summer Youth Employment Program is young people ages 16 to 24. Youth must be 16 by the day the program starts. And so for some of you who may be new to our Summer Youth Employment Program, usually the program starts the ending of June, the beginning of July. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Youth must show proof of Chicago residency. This program is specifically for young people that are residents of the city of Chicago. Have a valid Chicago Public School or State of Illinois ID card or driver's license. Have completed the OSC online application and have a signed consent form from the parent or guardian on file for youth under the age of 18. And remember, this is an employment program. Youth will need the appropriate documentation to complete an I-9 form. The I-9 form, since we pay wages, this is wages just like the Chicago Youth Service Corps, you have to make sure that the youth have the I-9 forms completed and W-4 for employment. A slight change for the program, is the recruitment and enrollment. You'll notice that respondents will be responsible for recruiting youth in their respective programs. So we're looking to you to recruit 50% of the enrolled youth, while the other 50% of enrolled youth will be selected randomly through the lottery from the citywide application portal. And so for those that are familiar with the program, the One Summer Chicago link will be the online application for young people to apply, and that's what feeds into our City Span Yes system, which is what an awarded agency would have access to once they're awarded to pool their young people. So there's actually a nice workflow to connect youth once they apply for One Summer, and also it's the same tool that you'll use to recruit your young people. Next slide. And just to get into the target population, out of the total enrolled youth recruited by either the agency, which is yourselves, or the citywide lottery, at least 50% of youth participants per respondent must identify with at least one of the following underrepresented populations outlined below. And I'll leave this up for a minute for you to take a look, but I will also read it aloud. We're looking as a part of our targeted population, individuals with disabilities. So for example, physically impaired, visually impaired. Individuals attending high schools that are categorized as level 2, level 3, or option high schools based on the current Chicago Public School quality rating policy. And the link has been included. It is also in the RFP. DFSS will assign the schools and facilitate the leakage agreements to awarded respondents to ensure they enroll youth from these schools. And I want to make a note that some of you may already have partnerships with schools through other programs that you operate. And by all means, as long as they fall under these categories, then great, you can continue those relationships. For those that are applying for the very first time and have relationships with schools that are level 2, level 3, or options, you can use those relationships as well. But if you don't, and you're really committed to running a program this summer, and you're like, well, I need assistance with working with this particular high school on the west side, we can have those further discussions once you're an awarded delegate. Individuals who are English as a second language learner, that's pretty self-explanatory. Individuals that are experiencing homelessness and unstably housed. Individuals placed in the foster care system. So this is your youth in care. These are your young people that are living in group homes or that may live with foster families. individuals who are justice involved, so on parole or probation. Opportunity youth defined as out of school and out of work. Next slide. Excuse me for that. Program requirements. DFSS is seeking respondents with a proven track record in implementing youth development programs, youth workforce development, or specialized training program tailored to youth in Chicago. And if you have your RFP up, you can refer to pages 9 and 10 that breaks down the program requirements. Again, this program is for young people ages 16 to 24. The minimum number of youth served per agency. We're looking at agencies to work with at least 50 youth participants per agency, with additional increments of 75 participants and 1 youth coordinator or 1 instructor based on proposal submittal of job placement and or specialized training program. So I'll pause here for a minute. One of the questions we always get about SYEP is, what is the ratio? The ratio is 1 staff person to 25 youth. Now, in this instance for this RFP, there are agencies that may apply to do your traditional employment placement. So you're placing young people at summer camps to work as camp counselors, to working at Walgreens, Starbucks, private sector offices, etc. You will have a youth coordinator who will ensure that the young people are being supported and going to work. That's just an example. Now, if you're an organization that has a specialty program, so let's say you have a coding program that you have operated for the last 3 years, and you're looking to bring on an instructor to work with those 25 youth, we will allow you to submit a proposal to talk about operating a training program. But again, it's a 1 to 25 ratio. So I'm just using a coding program as an example. If you're an organization that would like to do both, just be clear in your proposal that you want to work with 25 youth being placed in the traditional job placement. 25 youth will go through a training program, 1 coordinator for the 25 youth that are being placed in a job, 25 youth that are being trained by an instructor. So that's just to give you an example of based on your proposal submission. The recruitment still stands that 50% of youth identify with at least one of the target populations. And so we just covered that in the target population. The referral sources. So please feel free to recruit youth attending high schools that are categorized as level 2, level 3, and option high schools. Agencies will participate in recruitment events on site and partner with school personnel on obtaining referrals. In addition, DFSS will facilitate collaborations with stakeholders from institutions such as child welfare agencies, Chicago Public School, Chicago Police Department, Parole and Probation departments, homeless services providers, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and mental health organizations that provide wraparound services for youth and their families. So the referral sources, as you notice, is very broad. But it's broad because many of you provide different services and work with varied populations. We wanted to make sure we capture that so that you can partner with such entities, but also know that at times DFSS, as the Human Services Department, at times we have people reach out to us in different organizations to say, hey, we have this recruitment event, can One Summer Chicago come out? And usually Lisa Davis and I and a couple of our interns will attend recruitment events. And sometimes if they're in particular community areas, we will reach out to our funded delegate agencies to say, hey, come join us for this recruitment event. So more to follow once you're an awarded delegate. The program schedule. It's 120 hours per youth in total over a span of 6 weeks, so 20 hours a week. As a part of The program, as I mentioned earlier, it usually starts the ending of June, beginning of July, and will go through mid-August. We look for young people to be placed or in a training program 20 hours a week for 6 weeks. The budget categories, so these are the important things we need to know. Youth wages, DFSS will provide funding for the youth wages. The wages for the youth coordinator and or instructor wages, transportation, supplies, snacks, and administrative funds. It says administration, but it's actually administrative funds. The youth wages, this is another exciting thing. So I said there was exciting announcements today. The second exciting announcement is the youth wages. So you'll notice it's $15 an hour. Last year, we actually, or the year before, 2020, we started to pay $14 an hour, when now we are paying exactly the minimum wage set by the city of Chicago, which is $15 an hour. For those who have previously been with us, ADP will be an option. We refer to it as Centralized Payroll, and it is only available for summer youth employment program. For those that are brand new to us and are wondering, what is Centralized Payroll? Centralized Payroll from the DFSS side is we will work with agencies once they are funded by DFSS to process their payroll during the summer. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, because there is a slide dedicated to Centralized Payroll. But it is an option for us to assist with processing payroll only for the youth. So let me be clear. And I also need to be clear that if an agency opts into ADP for the summer, you can't opt out in the middle of the program, because there are some administrative functions that happen on our end with the city's comptroller's office and the city's Department of Finance. The staff wages, youth coordinators and instructor wages, $20 per hour for 25 hours for 8 weeks. And we add an additional few hours. You'll notice if the youth are in program 20 hours, your coordinators and your instructors have an additional 5 hours and an additional 2 weeks to allow for prep, to allow for program support to your organizations, to do closeout reports, things like that. Next slide. A continuation of the program requirements. And so again, agencies are responsible for recruiting and supporting youth ages 16 to 24. We are also responsible for recruiting and monitoring of work sites. So if you are a traditional job placement program, you are responsible as the delegate agency to recruit and monitor the work sites and partnerships that you're developing to place young people this summer. You'll be responsible for delivering My Shine, My Future trainings. And for those who aren't familiar, My Shine, My Future is a citywide initiative that has really brought together youth development practitioners and sister agencies from across the city. There is an online platform that is being finalized, but this is where young people will use and do their financial capabilities and job readiness training. You'll be responsible for hiring quality coordinators and instructors. You'll be responsible for matching youth with employment placement or specialized training program based on youth's demonstrated interests and skills. Also note, you will be responsible for administering payroll for youth wages, unless we're the ones that are doing your payroll, but there is still a process of documentation that we will need with your assistance to make sure that young people are have their documentation ready to work. So the slight difference is, if you're an organization that's doing the youth payroll, you will still be required to do the I-9 and W-4 since we pay wages. The same thing for those that are on centralized payroll, but the difference is we actually process the payroll on your behalf, but you as an organization are still responsible for collecting the documentation. Next slide. So for the first one, as I mentioned, the recruiting and supporting young people, youth will be recruited by selected respondents. All young people must complete a One Summer Chicago application. This is an online application. I'm going to repeat that again. This is an online application that young people will need to complete. We do not do paper applications. We have not done paper applications in over 8 to 10 years. Everything is done electronically. So please make a note of that. Awarded agencies will have the opportunity to select 50 participants, or excuse me, 50% of the youth for the Summer Youth Employment Program. The remaining 50% will be randomly selected through the One Summer Chicago application pool, and I kind of mentioned that earlier. The key activities of recruitment and youth support: coordinate outreach and recruitment of identified youth, develop and engage youth in job placement or specialized training program, provide an orientation for youth and their parents. And that's kind of a good one to mention, because when we have a broad age of 16 to 24. Our 18 to 24, I mean, you don't necessarily need to invite their parents, but more the 16 and 17-year-olds, you want to make sure that they at least know what their young people are signing up for, especially because they're underage. Track and enter data into DFSS data management system. Currently, we use CitySpan Yes, which is the youth employment system. Provide assistance, information and assistance for youth to obtain their state IDs. This may include finding the nearest Department of Motor Vehicles, walking them through the process of obtaining an ID, or disclosing the cost to obtain an ID. And the reason we mention that is one of the biggest challenges is that young people are constantly saying that they don't have identification. And as we're preparing them for employment, we want to make sure that these are the things that they have in preparation for workforce. Next slide. Recruitment and monitoring of work sites. Respondents will recruit work sites and or specialized training programs in various industries who are committed and have experiences working with youth at their sites. These work sites and specialized training programs need to foster youth experiences in exploring career interests, assist in developing employable skills, and gain a certificate, if applicable, from the specialized training program. In addition, the work sites and specialized program will receive ongoing communication and monitoring from the respondent to ensure youth are gaining employment experiences and 21st century skills. So I will summarize this. Please make sure that as you're recruiting work sites, and be it really great, meaningful work experiences, that these are folks that are open to working with young people. In the past, we've heard some stories where people would have all these work sites, but then they weren't youth friendly or didn't understand some of the challenges of young people. So please make sure you're communicating with your work sites and you have agreements in place, just to make sure that the experience for the young people is a successful experience. Key activities of recruiting and monitoring work sites. Recruit an array of work sites to create a pool of various opportunities in public or private sectors for youth to have choice in selecting an area of interest. Seek out partnerships with providers who have a robust training program that provides youth a certificate or credential. Partner with other community-based organizations who can provide youth with meaningful work experiences. You've probably heard me say that a few times already, but truly we want our young people to have meaningful work experiences. Respondent can choose to be a work site. So if you're an agency applying for this RFP, you could also be a work site and host youth at your agency. Respondent can place youth in their own specialized training program at their agency. So if you happen to be an agency that has a training program, earlier I used the example of a coding program, but let's say you have a workshop program, a carpentry program, you could also place youth in those particular programs. And then lastly, host worksite orientation to review roles and responsibility of employer and agency support, such as a communication plan, very important, wages, schedule, and worksite agreements. And I have to highlight this, just it's super important. The wage schedule, we understand that all of one summer we start at the same time, but the payment may be slightly different. We've had agencies that pay weekly or bi-weekly, twice a week, or excuse me, every 2 weeks. Please make sure that you communicate with your worksite what your schedule is, because one of the things, the hotline that's connected here at DFSS, sometimes we have young people and parents that are irate that their young person wasn't paid. So we just want to make sure that you communicate that not only with your young people, but also with the worksite. And then make sure you have a worksite agreement in place so that the worksites understand what they're responsible for and what you're responsible for. Next slide. Deliver OSC online training. All programs are required to facilitate online workforce and financial capability training modules through My Shine My Future. My Shine My Future is a digital platform that was designed to help youth develop 21st century skills to prepare them for employment, including soft skills development and financial literacy. The workforce training module provided will assist youth to work effectively with others by developing skills such as communication, critical thinking, decision-making and problem-solving skills, and self-management. Learn work norms and culture. Understand career pathways and decision points, including the linkages amongst educational attainment, relevant experience, demonstrative skills, and career advancement. Build professional networks. Assess skills to discover and reflect on interests and strengths in coaching. Use summer employment experiences or specialized training experiences to build a resume. And so one of the questions may be, well, what if my agency has its own workforce type program? That's great. I would say do that in addition to. And part of it is we want to make sure that our young people have very broad experiences of their workforce development training. And so the My Shine My Future one will be a part of that. But in addition to, if your organization also provides workforce development, you can do both concurrently. Next slide. Hire quality youth coordinators and instructors. Respondent will recruit, hire, and manage a youth coordinator and or instructor dependent on proposal submitted. One youth coordinator will be assigned to every 25 youth enrolled for job placement. So I kind of covered this earlier, but just kind of want to reiterate. Youth coordinators should be positive, enthusiastic, civic-minded individuals with connections to both their community and the world outside their community. Youth coordinators will ensure learning objectives are met for the overall program while providing individual and group support, instruction, and coaching to youth participants in a culturally competent environment. Duties also include administrative functions as entering time into CitySpan and ensuring completion of My Shine My Future workshops and the OSC Working Impact Assessment Post-Program Survey by all your youth. And just a side note, some of you may say, well, I've never seen this. Oh, Julia, go back. Some of you are probably thinking, well, I'm not familiar with My Shine My Future or this CitySpan system you keep talking about. No worries, we will make sure that you are trained if you are an awarded delegate. So for those who have been awarded in the past, normally I am the voice of CitySpan. I do a lot of the trainings. My Shine My Future, there will be a folks that we're working with. And as far as the OSC Working Impact, we worked with various partners to deliver training. So there will be training accessible to all of you once you are a funded agency. Now, if a respondent proposes to operate a specialized training program, the respondent will recruit, hire, and manage an instructor. One instructor will be assigned to every 25 youth enrolled. Instructors should be positive, again, enthusiastic, civic-minded individuals with connections to both their community and the world outside their community. Instructors will ensure learning objectives are met for the overall program while also providing individual and group support, instruction and coaching to youth participants in a culturally competent environment. And same thing for the instructors. Duties will also include administrative functions such as entering time into CitySpan and ensuring My Shine My Future workshops. and the OSC Working Impact Assessments post-program survey are completed by all your youth. Next slide. And of course, key activities of staff hiring and program delivery. Hire and supervise program staff to manage the program from kickoff to completion. Design innovative program focused on community contribution, beautification, sustainability, or safety. All youth coordinators and/or instructors working with youth must be properly trained and have a cleared background check on file with their agency and DFSS prior to the hire for the program. Administer payroll for youth coordinators and instructors. So regardless if we do the payroll for your young people, you as a funded delegate agency will be responsible for administering payroll for your youth coordinators and instructors. Personnel salaries and/or payment will not exceed the budget allocation unless supplemented with administrative funds or in-kind match. Next slide. And just to give you a bit more of the roles. So for the youth coordinator roles and responsibilities, and there you'll notice there's some similarities, but for the youth coordinator, we're looking for them to facilitate, direct, and supervise all programmatic activities with youth. They will act as a liaison to the young people, the agency, and DFSS personnel. Build strong, positive relationships with youth participants and facilitate team building between the participant cohorts. So again, since this is a 1:25 ratio, we want to make sure they're creating community. Engage youth in wraparound services within their agency and work with external partners to provide additional support to services to youth who are identified as at risk. Monitor youth participants' placement at a worksite or specialized training program for 6 weeks. Maintain communication and a working relationship with the worksite or specialized training program. Develop and implement creative strategies to retain youth participants throughout the program. Assist with data collection and entry into CitySpan and other DFSS designated platforms. Implement performance measure tools with your youth participants and ensure completion. Attend mandatory trainings and meetings per request of DFSS, including but not limited to for CitySpan and DFSS technology platform. Respondents must submit a job description of the youth coordinator position. Now the instructor roles and responsibilities. Instructors will facilitate specialized training instruction to the youth participants for 6 weeks. Act as a liaison to participants, agency, and DFSS personnel. Build strong, positive relationships with youth participants and facilitate team building between participant cohorts. Maintain communication with the assigned youth coordinator. Develop and implement creative strategies to retain youth participants throughout the program. Assist with data collection and entry into CitySpan and other DFSS designated platforms. Implement performance measurement tools with youth participants and ensure completion. Attend mandatory trainings and meetings per request of DFSS, including but not limited to CitySpan and DFSS designated technology platform. Respondents must submit a job description for the instructor position. If respondents intend to provide a specialized training program, a description must be included in the relevant application question. Next slide. Number 5, match youth with employment, placement, or specialized training programs based on youth demonstrated interests and skills. Respondents will match youth to employment, placement, or specialized training program based on youth interview and online application responses under the interest skills section. Respondent will interview youth to assess the youth's interests, skills, and goals for the type of employment experiences or training that youth participants are seeking. Key activities for matching youth based on interests and skills. Interview youth within the first month of the OSC online application being open to the public. Respondents will utilize their own identified matching tool to assess and place youth to a job placement or specialized training program that falls under their interests. Respondent will use interest skills section of the DFSS online application portal to match youth based on their identified skills. Next slide. Administering payroll. Youth participants will receive wages for up to 120 hours at $15 an hour, not to exceed $1,998 for the entire program per participant, as reimbursed by the City of Chicago. Agencies are allowed to recruit new participants should some participants choose not to complete the entire summer of programming. If participants drop out, agencies may enroll additional youth to fulfill the remaining hours from the previous participant. So for instance, Evelyn Benitez starts with One Summer Chicago, SYEP, and I work for 1 week. So I work for 20 hours. But then all of a sudden I say, you know what? I don't want to do this program anymore. I quit as the young person. So that leaves 100 hours open. If you have another young person on your wait list and I'm like, you know what? Lisa Davis is ready to work. I'm going to call Lisa Davis, say, Lisa Davis, I had a young person quit, or you don't even have to get into that specific, but you can say, I have an opening. Are you interested in working in the program? Make sure they have an online application. They have the paperwork to come on in. They can work the remaining 100 hours of the program. So that's what we mean about agencies enrolling additional youth. Youth wages can be paid by the respondent, their fiscal agent, or respondents may opt to utilize a third-party payroll processor contracted with the City of Chicago for handling youth wages during the summer. So I want to talk about this a little bit. So many of you that are on this webinar may think, you know what, as an organization, I want to apply and do my own payroll. Great. That's an option. Some of you may be a smaller agency to say, you know, I really want to partner with a fiscal agent to do my payroll. That's perfectly allowed. You can apply together. Your fiscal agent can be the person or the organization to run payroll for you. Some of you may say, you know what, I'm a decent sized agency, but I'm really looking to have the city do my payroll. That is an option that is available to you only for SYEP. And you will hear me emphasize this. This is not available for Chicago Ability. This is not available for Chicago Youth Service Corps because that is a year-round program. This is only available for SYEP for the summer. All respondents will need to indicate in their application their youth payroll option, whether they wish to opt into centralized payroll system or not. Respondents will not be permitted to switch into or out of the payroll option once the program has started. And I mentioned this earlier, there is a workflow process. Once we have agencies that are awarded, those that we know that will be in centralized payroll, DFSS has to work with multiple partners within the department, as well as our treasurer and the city's Department of Finance, to make sure that the wages are set up. And it's a very lengthy process. Somebody can't tell me, oh, by the way, I changed my mind, I want to do my own payroll. That doesn't work that way, and vice versa. Somebody can't tell me in May or June, guess what, I want to be in centralized payroll, because there's still a whole nother setup that needs to occur. In this case, we use ADP, and that it's a very timely process. So as you're working on your application, please, please, please make sure you let us know which way you're going. The next bullet is all programs will operate on a reimbursement basis. Therefore, it is important that respondents have adequate and available resources to meet program and payroll costs, regardless of the payroll option chosen. At the end of the calendar year, the awarded respondent must send tax forms directly to program participants and respond to inquiries or issues during the program period. So, a couple of things that I want to break down in this particular paragraph. Even if you are in centralized payroll, you are still responsible for costs for your instructors, your youth coordinators, transportation, snacks. That is still part of the reimbursement process, even if you're on centralized payroll. For those that are choosing to do the youth payroll, the staff payroll, transportation, snacks, materials and supplies, whatever that you are including, you have to make sure that you understand that this is a reimbursement process. Like there isn't an advance of the funding. Everyone must voucher on a regular basis. And what that means is after you're an awarded agency, there's training that is provided. We call it voucher training on how to submit your vouchers for reimbursement. For those that are currently funded through the department with other programs, it is still the same system. We call it iSupplier, e-procurement. It's used interchangeably, but the iSupplier system is where you are submitting your vouchers once you're awarded. So that process doesn't change. Next slide. And just to talk a little bit more about centralized payroll, because there are additional steps needed to take, which is why we can't allow people to switch in and out of centralized payroll. But the awarded respondents who are seeking to opt into ADP Workforce Now, because that's who we use, a third-party payroll processor contracted with the City of Chicago for handling youth wages during the summer, must provide at the time of award. So now this is me broadcasting ahead or moving ahead. So once you're a funded agency and you're an agency that decides, like I'm going to say Agency Benitez, and Agency Benitez has been awarded, and now I want to do centralized payroll. These are the documents that I have to submit once I'm awarded. A copy of the IRS tax identification letter that includes the EIN number, a copy of the State of Illinois identification number, a copy of the IDES letter that includes the ID number, and in this case, it'll be the 2022 rate. Or no, actually, I think it's a year behind 2021. Name and contact information for 2 people that will be responsible for receiving ADP payroll documents for liquidation vouchers, third quarter 941 filings, and W-2 preparations. So this is where I need folks to be clear. If you're an agency that doesn't use ADP in your overall organization, so I'll use the example of you're an agency that uses Paychex or Paylocity, I'll even say QuickBooks. It is your responsibility to understand that as a part of preparing your documentation, the youth are still employees of your agency. They are not employees of the City of Chicago. So I have to say that again. The young people, even though like you opt into centralized payroll, you are the employer of record, not the City of Chicago, not DFSS. And so what that means is if you're using, excuse me, other payroll providers, you have to integrate the information which we will pull for you from CitySpan, yes, once the youth are hired, accepted, and once they're in Workforce Now, because we have to upload the youth information, which is done securely. It's done with myself and a payroll consultant from ADP to ensure that young people are in there with their social security number and things like that. And what happens at the end of the program or during the program, you're entering the time into CitySpan, and we are cutting either checks or pay cards. Once the young people are paid, there are payroll registers, statistical summaries, payroll summaries that are provided to your agency, and you will submit a voucher, but we call it a liquidation because you're not being reimbursed because we already processed the payroll. And so that information we send out every time we run a payroll. The last 2 points of the third quarter 941 filing and W-2 preparations, we send out a secure email of the spreadsheets with this information that you need in order to process your filings and your W-2s. And I state this because some people think like, oh, this is easy, the city's gonna pay. No, there are some very intricate pieces when it comes to your filings. So please, as you're going through this RFP, especially this section, make sure you talk to your HR departments, if you have an HR department or your finance department, if you're a smaller agency and you do this all, just please make sure that you are looking at this information clearly, because we want to make sure that you understand there are some additional steps needed when it comes to payroll, and then what that means for your organization when you have to do your third quarter filings and W-2 preparations. Additionally, all awarded respondents, regardless if opting into centralized payroll, ADP Workforce Now will be required to complete the following ADP documentation and submit to DFSS for preparation and agency implementation. So there are 4 documents needed, and we would provide this to you once you're an awarded agency. ADP Client Account Agreement, ADP Reporting Agent Authorization, ADP Major Accounts Agreement, and a Security Master's Registration. Please note, if an agency currently uses ADP Workforce Now as a part of its overall payroll for its agency, they must indicate this to DFSS. DFSS will provide ADP an Excel spreadsheet of awarded agencies who use ADP Workforce Now and awarded agencies who use another payroll provider to ensure the system is set up accordingly. Respondents who use other third-party payroll providers will be responsible for integrating total wages and tax report. So what you see bolded is our files that you will receive from us, and statement of deposits into the third quarter 941 filing. Then they will use the total wages and tax report to create the youth participants W-2 forms in January of the following year. So this is also important to note that if you are an organization that uses ADP, so let's say, I'm Agency Davis, and Agency Davis has all her staff, and I'm talking about her adult program staff in ADP, and she's submitting her application for SYEP and says, you know what? I want you to do the payroll DFSS. I need her to let me know, because then when we work with ADP, we can say, ADP, here's an agency that already uses you. There's some technical stuff they do on the back end to make sure that the information is collected, and the process slightly changes because they then will do the filing for you. The difference is if you're an agency who doesn't use them as a part of your agency's practice, you have to do these additional steps of integrating the total wages, the tax report, and the statement of deposits for your filings. So those are kind of the slight differences. So again, I encourage you to talk to your finance people, to your HR people, your executive directors, to make sure you're clear on which direction you want to go with centralized payroll. Next slide. And program requirements. And this is just an example of the budget allocation for this program. So it gives you an insight of what we're expecting to see. So the expectation is a minimum of 50 youth. So with this here, you'll see there's approximately 99,900 listed for 50 youth. So for every 50 youth, that just gives you an example of who we're serving or how much it costs for their wages. The anticipated cost of the program for the minimum of 50 youth is $135,988. So if you submit an application for this and you're telling me I'm serving 50 youth, I expect to see a budget minimally of $135,000. Now, if you want to serve more than 50 youth, we ask that you do this in increments of 25, because then you have a staff person attached to it. So for instance, if you look, if you plan to increase your budget, it's about $67,994 for each additional increment of 25 youth to 1 coordinator or instructor. So if you look at the breakdown in table 3, and this is also in the actual RFP, you have 50 youth participants. You'll notice that it says wages with FICA and workers' comp, and then in parentheses it says rate varies. When we give an allocation, we do this calculation of $15 an hour times 120 hours times 1.11. And the reason for that is we are mindful, because again, this is a youth employment program and we pay wages. all of you on this call may have a varied workers' comp rate. So it's kind of hard to measure like what that particular rate is. And I think we kind of go back and forth between like 0.0355, but then we also include the Social Security and Medicare, which normally is at 0.0145 and 0.0645. You don't have to note that it's on the budget form, but when we give you the allocation once you're awarded, that's why when you see this rate, this is on the higher end, it looks like 1665. It may be lower, it may be 16 and maybe 1589, but that's based on the workers' comp rate. And because again, this is a youth employment program, we just wanted you to see like what how we allocate the budget. And then you'll notice that for the position, so this is a 1:25 ratio. So for 50 youth, there are 2 staff, and the asterisk, of course, could be 1 coordinator, 1 instructor. If you're doing traditional job placement and a training program, or it could be 2 coordinators, and you're doing all 50 young people that are being placed in different positions. That's perfectly fine. You see that we have the rate at $20. For 200 hours, totaling $8,000. And then some miscellaneous things that we've added. We kind of did this rate of supply snack because there may be certain materials that you need. And so the way we allocated that was at $20 per youth. Again, it's a 6-week program, so there's about $6,000 that you can use for supplies, snacks, and things as programmatic costs. So we just kind of use supplies and snacks generally. And then for transportation, currently we understand that we are in a pandemic, but there are some young people or young adults, agencies that may have opportunities where youth may need to be in person, let's say at an office or working at Starbucks. We allocate 3 weeks of transportation, figuring that at least allows young people before they receive their first check to have access to transportation. And that's usually like the 7-day bus card, give or take. And you notice the rate currently is $29. That's kind of what's been allocated. If it costs a little bit more, well, then you're allowed to use your admin line, which is the last line of $17,000, give or take. That is funding that you can use to your discretion. If you want to increase transportation, you can pull it from that line. If you wanted to add additional staff outside of the 2 coordinators or the instructor coordinator, you would also pull it out of this admin line. So this is just an example. So when you think about, as you're working on your budgets for this proposal, take this because this is what we're looking for. If you plan to apply for 50 youth, we should see 135,000. If you plan to apply for 100, so on and so forth, just make sure you're following the calculations that are provided here. Next slide. Performance goals and outcomes. So what we're seeking is we want to make sure that we're tracking the progress of achieving the goals of this program and assessing its success. DFSS will monitor a set of performance indicators that may include but are not limited to. We're looking at 100% of youth will demonstrate change in financial behavior. So earlier I had mentioned the financial capabilities training, and some of that is actually incorporated into the My Shine My Future platform. There's also a group that we work with that will provide workshops for all the young people on financial capabilities. Some of you may know it as financial literacy, but we're really looking to make sure young people understand what are they doing with that first check to how do I understand credit. But that's something you'll learn more about once you're an awarded delegate. 100% will demonstrate work readiness skills for continued employment. And so that's making sure that all your participants complete the work readiness for My Shine My Future, in addition to workforce readiness that your agency may provide. 40% of youth will secure long-term employment after the summer. We know that's ambitious, but we're just hoping to see that young people that are in the program will continue to find other types of employment, training opportunities to really develop and hone their skills. So that's really what that thinking was. The next part is to monitor and recognize intermediate progress towards the above performance indicators. DFSS also intends to track output metrics that may include but are not limited to. So 100% of targeted youth will be recruited and enrolled in the program. So if you apply for 50 youth and you're awarded 50 youth, we should see 50 youth in the program. 50% of those youth will meet the targeted population criteria. So we already talked about the target population. 100% of youth will be placed in employment or attend a training program identified by the agency and youth. Pretty straightforward. 95% of youth will complete the entire 6-week program. 100% of youth will be paid on time. So regardless if you do the payroll or I do the payroll, we have to make sure young people are paid on time. 75% of youth will report a positive relationship with an instructor or coordinator in their program. 100% of youth will complete the workforce preparation training via the online platform. So I mentioned earlier the My Shine My Future. 100% of youth will complete the financial literacy training via the online platform, again, My Shine My Future. 80% of youth will sign up for direct deposit. Now, I didn't mention direct deposit necessarily for centralized payroll because currently that system is only set up for paper checks and pay cards. But overall, one of the things that we've looked at is our agencies who do their own payroll really have pushed to and it is part of their agency's practice to do direct deposits. And so that's something like that we like to measure, and understanding that it is an output, but it's something good to know because we do have a funder we've been working with for quite a few years that is always interested in trying to ensure that young people understand like banking options and direct deposit options. You know, note this to the local currency exchange because I will go there for my city sticker at times. But we just want to make sure that young people understand like what are the financial options and really educating them on what it means to bank, what it means to do direct deposit. So that's why we include this in the metrics. Next slide. Guidance for respondents. Respondents must indicate which Healthy Chicago Equity Zone they will be applying for in alignment with the Chicago Department of Public Health's 6 Healthy Chicago Equity Zones. So if you take a moment, what you see currently on the screen, and this was also in the RFP, we pulled data from 2021 of the high concentrations of young people served between the ages of 16 to 24. And the darker colors are really an indication of where the majority of our young people came from and were also employed during the summer. You'll notice that there are 6 zones. So there's North Central, Northwest, West, Far South, Near South, and Southwest. And within each zone, there's approximately 7 to like 9 community areas. And also note that we look at programming in community areas and not necessarily neighborhoods. So just please note that as someone may say like, well, I don't see my neighborhood. Just understand that we have this broken out by community areas. Respondents must submit 1 application for each Healthy Chicago Equity Zone for which they wish to apply. Respondents can only apply for a Healthy Chicago Equity Zone in which they can demonstrate a physical address. Multiple applications by the same agency for the same Healthy Chicago Equity Zone will not be considered. And so I'll pause there for a minute. If you're applying for, let's say, the West zone, which includes the Lower West Side and South Lawndale, we're seeking an agency that if they identify with running, they have an organization, it's in South Lawndale, and they are trying to submit their application for SYEP, great. They are applying to make sure that they're and outline like what you plan to do, but I don't need them to submit one also for the Lower West Side because Lower West Side is also in the same zone. So just note that when you're applying, just submit for the 1 zone. Respondents seeking funding from multiple sites in different healthy Chicago equity zones are required to apply for each zone. So if you're an agency that has a program in the North Central zone, in the Northwest zone, in the West, Far South, Near South, and Southwest, you can submit 6 applications as long as they're for distinctive zones. We don't want to see 3 or 4 applications from your agency for the same zone. And we could talk a little bit more about that. If you have questions, please feel free to drop that in the chat. Next slide. And then this is just to give you an idea of how the equity zones are broken up. This table 5 is also in the RFP. I'm not going to read the community areas, but I'll leave it up for a few seconds. But this is to give you an idea. So if I'm an agency, and I use the example of I'm in South Lawndale, and I serve, or I have partners in Austin, Lower West Side, I don't need to see multiple applications. I just need to see the one for the West zone. But if you're, again, same example, an organization in South Lawndale, but then you have a partner in Chicagoland, you have a partner in Albany Park, you have a partner in Edgewater, you have a partner in Grand Boulevard, and you have a partner in Beverly, then you can submit 6 applications, because that means you're running programs in those zones. And I'll use another example. If you're working with, let's say, 100 young people, and you're housed in South Lawndale, you want 25 young people working in your training program in South Lawndale, great. You're working with a partner in Chicagoland, great, and they're doing a training program, you can apply for that. You have another partner in Albany Park that's doing traditional employment placement, and that's perfectly fine. You can submit an application for that. And let's say the 4th one is Rogers Park, for North Central, and they're doing a training program, that's perfectly fine for that. So just wanted to give you an idea of what we mean by multiple applications. Next slide. And this is just a table of what we're anticipating. And this, again, you'll see that this is a range. Based on the data from 2021, you'll notice kind of like the breakdown of young people served in those areas. And then just with that data of 2021, this kind of helped us think about 2022 of how to break out the approximation of youth that we want to serve. And so for this RFP, and I'm mentioning it now, for SYEP, we're looking to serve about 8,150 youth, with the understanding that we consolidated plus an SYEP together. So this is how we got to this number of 8,150. And based on just past data, this is how we broke out the anticipated number of youth served. And then just with the rate of a minimum of 50, this is how we have the range of anticipated agencies. So on the far south side, I could have 13 agencies, or I could easily have 10, but I should definitely have at least 6. Just depending on how many youth they apply for. Same thing for the near south side. You see the range between 10 and 20. Again, depending on how many youth an agency applies for, will determine that number, so on and so forth. And this part of the reason we did this breakdown is because we wanted to ensure geographic equity. We wanted to make sure that the distribution of funds are balanced by youth population. So that's a really key thing, right? We look at population, we look at placement. As it was demonstrated from our data from 2021. And just, again, this just gives you an idea of our thinking of what we anticipate funding for 2022. And then, of course, respondents are encouraged to collaborate in order to allow agencies to subcontract. So we encourage, like for some of our smaller agencies, like if you really want to be a partner, and it's like, you know what, like I'm almost there, but I need somebody to help me fiscally, that's okay. Find a strong fiscal partner. If you have a great program, but fiscally you're still a little short, then please find somebody that really has their finances down pat, because I'll tell you, an organization and partnership of a strong finance and strong program makes your life so much easier for you as well as the young people you serve. And then of course, we just want to make sure that this allows agencies, networks, to really be expanded and deliver on programming. Next slide. And now this is the selection criteria. And in the selection criteria, we've basically broken out the proposal into 4 sections. And so I'll run through these fairly quickly. So the first section is the strength of proposal. We're really looking for folks to clearly define their employment and or specialized training program. Really, like, we want to make sure that you discuss, describe, and provide partnerships, agreements with agencies, and address and really show the desired outcomes for young people ages 16 to 24. Again, this is a program for the city of Chicago, but also, talk about this is not just limited to the target population, but also, the young people that you are currently serving and partnerships that you have. We want to make sure that respondents are really discussing the proposed program and supporting it with evidence-based practices in youth development, youth employment placement, specialized training. Talk about those really critical things that you have done. Talk about your past performances and what you've done. Like, I don't want to know what you did 20 years ago. What did you do last year? What are you currently doing? What have you done the last couple of years? This is your time to talk about that. The respondent needs to indicate that they will enroll no fewer than the minimum. So again, our minimum is 50. Talk about how are you going to serve these 50 young people. Respondent demonstrates a clear understanding of the target population and subpopulations targeted and their programmatic needs and challenges. So talk to us about your experiences. How do you plan to work with young people that we've identified in the target population? Talk about programmatic needs and challenges, but how you've addressed those, right? Respondent has an effective approach to recruiting, identifying, matching, and placing summer employment or specialized program, again, for youth ages 16 to 24. Like, really highlight those experiences of serving this population. That respondent demonstrates the ability to solicit and incorporate youth feedback. So as you're surveying your young people, some of this assessing we will also provide, but really just engaging what young people tell you. We do this, we've been doing this for quite a long time, but part of what makes us do better is that we ask the youth, like, what are the things you want to see differently? And if you have great experience of doing that, please talk about that in your proposal. And then lastly, that respondent demonstrates strong partnerships with other agencies and work sites. That's pretty straightforward. Next slide. Now this is a selection criteria about program performance, outcomes, and qualities. Respondents demonstrates evidence of strong past performance in similar youth employment programs or specialized programs against desired outcome goals and performance metrics and or notable accomplishments in providing services to youth ages 16 to 24. So what's the evidence? Some of you may be very researchy heavy. That's fantastic. This is your time to use the research you've done. And for those who truly have done just youth development programs and youth employment programs, please talk about that. That's the kinds of things, like, how have you measured that? How have you measured young people's success? These are the things we'll be looking for in your proposals. Respondent has relevant systems and processes needed to track and report performance on program outcomes. If there are additional outcomes that, outside of the ones we've indicated in our RFP, that you track as an organization that you see as relevant, please share that in your proposals. The respondent has experience using data to inform and improve its services or practices. That is very self-explanatory, but I will put an extra caveat. I can't tell you enough that we are asked on a regular basis about data. And part of it is, one, we want to make sure that programs are occurring, but are young people moving on a continuum? Are we seeing improvements? Are there stories that the data is telling us that we need to tweak our programs. I mean, this is why data has been so impactful. For those who have sat in my city span trainings, I always say, you know, data impacts policy. And so it's really important that, you know, that you have experience understanding data, tracking data, because, you know, part of it is, you know, this is how we make decisions about program designs and making improvements to programs. And then lastly, the respondent has relevant systems and processes needed to collect and store key participant and performance data, just making sure that you understand how to track it, if it's electronically, like in a database system like CitySpan, or that you have your files, of course, that are secure, but that you understand that if we ask out of your 50 youth, what was your demographic breakdown, how many were in school, things like that, that you know how to break down that data. Next slide. Organizational capacity. Respondent has qualified staff responsible for program oversight and management, as well as quality coordinators to engage with youth participants. So this is why we're asking folks to upload job descriptions of the coordinator instructors. We want to make sure you have the right staff and that really that we understand what their roles and responsibilities are and how they will manage and operate the program. Respondent has adequate systems and processes to support monitoring program expenditures and fiscal controls. I cannot emphasize this enough. Because we are a reimbursement-based program, you have to make sure your finances are tight. You have to make sure that your reporting is done on a regular basis, that you're vouchering on a monthly basis, because then you don't want to start receiving emails from DFSS that you haven't expended your funds, because then that tells folks that we don't need the money. So this is why fiscal controls and program expenditures are super critical. And you want to make sure that you have cash flow. So you have to make sure your finances are super tight. The third bullet, respondent has expertise working with the target population and relevant capabilities and infrastructures needed to serve this group. And so just thinking about who we're serving, right? Young people with disabilities, you know, youth in care, youth that are homeless or unstably housed, as an example, you know, you want to make sure that the folks that are serving and supporting these young people understand who they're working with. And then lastly, the respondent's organization reflects and engages diverse people of the community it serves. And we can't emphasize that enough, is making sure that you have folks that are culturally competent, that understand the communities that they're serving, and just truly engage in young people's diversity. Like, we celebrate the diversities, but also understanding the cultural needs of a community. So super important to make sure you have staff that reflect that and understand the culture. Next slide. And then this is the reasonable cost, budget, justification, and leveraging funds. This is always a good one, right? We want to make sure that folks have the fiscal capacity to implement the proposed program. So as I stated earlier, this is at a minimum like $137,000 grant. We want to make sure that folks have in place the capacity to run this program. Make sure you have your line of credit. Make sure if you're not the one who is doing your payroll or managing the finances, that you have a strong fiscal partner. You want to make sure that, you know, the fiscal capacity is together, because that's what you need to run your programs. The second bullet, the respondent leverages other funds and in-kind contributions to support total programs and administrative costs, state, federal, foundation, corporate, individual donations. Please note that for this program, you are not required a match at all. So $137,000 grant at a minimum is what is needed to run a program for 50 young people. Now, if you want to use additional funding, if you want to work with a foundation that you currently have, or you're leveraging another program to support this program, that is totally allowable. And if you're doing that, just please make sure you show that on the budget. The third bullet, the respondent demonstrates reasonable implementation costs and funding requests relative to its financial and human resources. So again, we gave you an outline of basically 50 youth, 2 staff, funding for transportation supplies, and some administrative dollars that you can use at your discretion. I mean, I don't want to see, you know, a crazy amount of all of a sudden we're paying folks like $50 an hour. Like, that's not what this is. Unless you're leveraging other funds to do that, I mean, that's a different conversation. But we just want to make sure that based on the budget outline that we provided, that we see that you understand the allocation that's being provided. Next slide. And this one, it's the attachments. So just please make sure that as you're working, if you're going to do job placement and you're working with other work sites, please make sure you have current worksite agreements. I don't want to see worksite agreements from year 2000 or 2010. And I'm not kidding. In the past, I have seen RFPs where people will give me MOUs, and this, I'll jump into the second line, their memorandum of understandings or MOUs or linkage agreements that are like 10 years old. I don't want to see that. I want to see current, like 2021, 2022 MOUs and linkage agreements. And then, of course, just make sure that you attach the job descriptions for the youth coordinators and the instructors that will be operating the program. So we just want to have an understanding of what types of responsibilities you're putting on the folks. And if you happen to have the resumes, I didn't include it on here, but feel free to upload those resumes. And then, of course, be sure to attach your organization's budget for this program. And make sure that all the program requirements are addressed. Next slide. I think I'm done with my portion. And I will transition this back to Julia to walk us through the timeline and then to walk us through e-procurement.
So that was very thorough. I was just chatting with Lisa about how to, since we're almost to the 30-minute left mark, what was the best use of our time? It looks like many of the questions are being answered in the questions box while we're being answered. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just talk to people a little bit about e-procurement, and then we can go forward if there's time. But since most of the questions are being answered, online, I don't want it because I just want to make sure everybody has an ability to ask all the questions they want and hopefully get a response now if they can. So if you have questions, please put them in the question box. And while I'm doing stuff, Evelyn and Lisa will no doubt be corresponding with you, and we'll see what is left. The applications, here's our proposal website, the timeline rather. The pre-proposal webinars today. The applications are due on February 24th at 12 noon. That's a hard deadline. And the program contract period begins April 1st. As I say frequently, well, in every webinar, that's 12 o'clock noon. Give yourself plenty of time to submit. It's not just like press send and go kind of experience. You need to go through about 8 steps to get to the point where you actually have your application submitted. And so give yourself plenty of time. If you miss the application deadline, there's really, aside from reposting the RFP and making everybody who applied reapply, there is really no way for us to accept a late application, so that's just not going to happen. I do suggest people, as I say here, start early, save often. So if you've never done business with the City of Chicago, you'll need to register into iSupplier. iSupplier is the e-procurement is the system that manages our contracts. It manages RFPs, but it also manages your ability to voucher and all of the post-award kind of activities. iSupplier is the vendor the vendor website that allows you as a vendor or an applicant to work in the e-procurement platform. So if you don't have an iSupplier account, you'll need to register for that. I suggest you do that now. It's not going to take it will take a few days for you to get kind of like you fill out a quick form and then you get an email back. Just a quick reminder: the stuff that comes from e-procurement tends to end up in people's spam, so do check your spam. We find even at the City of Chicago that when e-procurement wants to correspond with us about whatever, those emails end up in our spam or our junk. So just remind to do that. However, that being said, it is very important that you have a live email address when you set up individual accounts, because e-procurement will correspond with you, and the only way it will do it is through that email address that you provide. If it's going to a dud, then you won't maybe get to key correspondence. In terms of how to do an application, we spend a lot of time writing our scopes. Out of the scopes comes the evaluation criteria and selection criteria and the application questions. Those are all tied together, and out of that comes our evaluation tools. So if you find yourself stuck, do refer to the RFP for guidance in formulating your answers. Specifically look at that scope and look at the evaluation and selection criteria, and that should provide you some direction as to how to best answer your question. There's a 4,000 character limit, which includes punctuation and spaces, and that's for each response. So the response first name is 4,000 characters. The response, what are you going to be doing with the rest of your life? Also 4,000 characters. E-procurement is not going to count those 4,000 characters for you. And additionally, when you hit submit in e-procurement, it zips away your application, really never to be seen again. You will not have access to whatever you wrote in e-procurement. So I really recommend for people to do the application in a savable, manipulatable file, and then load it into the e-procurement website. Therefore, you will have what you applied for, and you can use the language again if you need to. The best that e-procurement is going to do is to give you a PDF of what you've submitted, and it's not one that you can really unlock and manipulate. E-procurement is built on an Oracle platform, which explains why it thinks the way it does. It works best with the Internet Explorer browser that nobody uses anymore, but it also works fine with Firefox and Safari and Chrome and all the other browsers. If you're finding that you're getting kicked out a lot, if you have a machine that's maybe a little bit on the older side, if stuff is glitchy, try it on Internet Explorer. But a lot of times, also know that this system really, in the 4 years I've been working with it, hasn't crashed. So if stuff is glitchy, it probably has to do with the interface on your computer more than anything that's buggy about the e-procurement platform at this point. Pro tip, don't use the back button on your browser. If you do, what will happen is that e-procurement will pretend that it's working for you, and when you go to save, you will get kicked out with an error message, and when you go back in, you will find that nothing that you put in there, in fact, was saved from the time that you used the back button. It's tricky that way. So if you wish to submit multiple applications for the SYEP, you will need to set up a unique user account in iSupplier, but all the user accounts can actually now use the same email address. This is sort of an update from prior incarnations. We were able to kind of work around this. So you'll have to set up the user accounts with different names, but the same email address can be used for all of them. One nice feature about e-procurement is that you can submit your application, and up until the deadline, you can pull it back and amend it until that deadline. So that's, so if you're worried about getting your submission in, you can submit and then pull it back, submit and then pull it back. Avoid rushes and possible mishaps by submitting early, and plan on the submission process taking 30 to 60 minutes. I feel that I really encourage people to do this the day before. We're going to have one application due on the 23rd and two applications due on the 24th. Pretty big, and they're pretty big anticipated pools of applicants. So what I would suggest is don't leave this till the last minute, because then if you actually need to get some help with something, you might be standing in a line and you might not get in. It was just, I really tell people to try to do, put these things in early, have the peace of mind, do it on your terms, set yourself up for success on this, and that is not running it to the end. I am available on those days, to give as much technical support as I can. The e-procurement hotline is available, but the fact is if 15 people are calling at 30 minutes out, we might not be able to solve your problem by the time you get to by the time the 12 o'clock rolls around. And if you don't submit, it's really going to not be, we are not going to really be able to accept your application. There is an e-procurement hotline that is 312-744-4357 or 744-HELP. It operates Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. They also have a email address. I think that's on this page, customer support at cityofchicago.org. You can also call me or call me or email me. I try to really turn stuff around within 24 hours. I don't have as much access into the system to troubleshoot, but I can at least point you in the right direction, or I'll refer you to customer support if I need to. If you don't really like talking to people, you can go to our training materials and with the documents and videos, which are online. Those are very helpful. I also have plenty of little handouts I can email you if you need, just for basic process. This webinar and the screenshots that we're going to go through next will be posted on the DFSS website. And they'll also be posted on the DFSS YouTube channel because that's what everybody wants to watch. If you're interested in finding out about more opportunities, you can go to the DFSS website for the alert section or the funding opportunity section, where all of our funding opportunities are posted. At this point, the only ones that I have up are these 3 youth ones, but there'll be a lot of things coming down the pike this year for a wide variety of programs. Here we go. If you are a new agency, I'm going to just briefly say, these are the things that you will need to have, need to be able to upload so you can gather those things, before you hit us. You need articles of incorporation. I need an IRS letter or something with a PIN number in it. You need your DUNS number, your CCR number, and a certificate of good standing with the state of Illinois. Please know that if you are pending on an IRS affirmation letter, you should really go for a fiscal agent. The one hard and fast rule with the city of Chicago is that you cannot enter into a contract with somebody that does not have a PIN number. And so if your PIN number is pending or your 501c3 letter is pending, that is not going to be good enough. And sometimes, the wait on those things and the lag time on stuff is really considerable. So I would say apply under a fiscal agent. It's not, if we try to award a contract and you don't have that critical piece, we're not going to be able to just switch it out to somebody else. It doesn't, our procurement system doesn't work that way. So if that is, something that you're working on now, please find a fiscal agent and just go that way so that you don't cheat yourself out of a contract, if you get to award. So now we're going to talk about how to accept an amendment. If the RFP you are interested in has been amended, and this one has been, because I put in the wrong webinar link, you're going to need to acknowledge and accept the amendment in order to start your application. You will do this by, you'll start the application. You can see here, anything that's in blue goes to something else, but you can see you're going to need to acknowledge. You'll start by doing the create quote in the actions button and then hit go. That will bring you to this screen where you will see you can see where you can download or you can look at the application and all the downloads. You can review the changes there in number 2. You can see in the middle underneath the title, the amendment description, which will tell you basically what is in the amendment. And then you're going to, after you have looked at all the documents, and I suggest that you do, because, we don't, sometimes the ones about the amendment, like the webinar, that's like a 1 sentence and there's nothing else to look at. But we're going to do an amendment that's going to be all the questions and all of the answers that we did for this webinar. It's useful information. Sometimes we've had to change dates, we've had to add stuff, and those will be in the amendment description, but you do really want to read the details. After you've done all that stuff, you're going to hit the Acknowledge Amendments button, which is either on the upper or lower left, right-hand side, and that will take you to this accepting screen where you're going to acknowledge that you accept. You'll do that by clicking on that tiny box, saying that you accept the terms and conditions and acknowledge the changes made to the RFP via the amendment. And then you're going to hit the acknowledge button again on the right-hand side, which will take you to this screen where you have a confirmation. You're going to confirm your acknowledgement of the acceptance of the amendment. So really, we want to make sure that you know that you're going to be held responsible for the information in the amendment. So you're going to confirm, you're going to say yes. I don't know who would say no, but you say yes. And then finally, you're going to click on this tiny checkbox saying you accept the terms and conditions. And then you're going to click accept. And that is the final step in acknowledging and accepting an amendment. When you hit accept, it will take you to the application page and you can get on with your life. In terms of how to submit an application, so you're done with submitting an amendment or accepting your amendment, and your life is, you've done a great job on this application. You have many, many copies of it that you can refer to after your application is whisked away into e-procurement. You're going to save the draft, because why not compulsively save drafts? And then you're going to hit continue. When you hit continue, e-procurement is going to do a scan of your entire application to kind of just troubleshoot for you. And here are the most common errors. I'm going to go through the 2 most common errors that people get. The first, you must quote on at least one line in the RFQ. You can see right below this, there's this tab called lines. This is referring to setting up budget stuff. We require that you submit a budget document to us. We don't use the lines, but e-procurement wants you to put in some placeholders in there. So you just go in, you put some placeholders on at least one of the lines, and then that error message should go away. In this particular example, it's like a quote value is required for requirement first name. Quote value is e-procurement speak for answer. The requirements are the application questions, and each requirement, each specific requirement or application question kind of has, we have to name it. So in this case, you didn't fill out the first name. It's a required. You have to provide an answer for that. Everybody has a first name. I guess maybe if you were Prince, but I'm thinking if you're Prince, you probably A, you're dead, and B, you probably just you do Prince. I don't know. Share. They work around it, I'm sure, because they're also big e-procurement users. Anyway, so you would put in your first name, you hit set, you would hit save and go on your merry way. Once your application is free from errors, you are ready to proceed and submit. And at this point, clicking the continue button should put your application into this review and submit phase that you can see up on the upper left there. And at that point, you're going to be able to scroll down, look at your entire application, see all of your answers, all of your attachments, everything that you need, everything that you have compiled to submit to us. And this is your opportunity. You can save your draft. You can do a printable view. As you can see, that will give you a PDF in like a pretty user-friendly format, if you ask me. And then at the bottom of this page, this is your last chance. Okay, so this is your last chance to review. So this is more of what you would be seeing. And then at the bottom, you have to do an electronic signature. You put in your name first, your title, and then you click the box. If you click the box first, you get an error message because the e-procurement doesn't want you to click the box first, even though it's the first thing it tells you. And then, because I couldn't fit it all under one screen and have it still be readable, you would just go look over, and there's a submit button. You click submit, and your application you'll know that you have submitted an application because you got this confirmation page that says that your application has been submitted or your quote has been submitted. So make sure you see that submission page. At this point, e-procurement will send you a confirmation email within 24 hours of submission. If you are nervous and you just want that extra assurance, give me a call or email me. I can see the submission the second that you put submit, the second that it hits e-procurement, I can see it, and I'm more than happy to confirm that to you. I can see that you guys have been burning up the question box. This is the time that we have questions. I'm going to open it up to Evelyn and Lisa, and that's kind of it. I would thank you so much for coming here. We're going to do one more slide where I have. Yeah, you have program questions. Here's Lisa's information, here's my information, but let's open it up for questions.
And thank you for that, Julia. And I just unmuted myself.
So
Hi, everyone.
You are more in touch of like which questions are outstanding. So why don't you guys take it away?
Let's see. Let me go back to my box here.
And then we'll get back, we'll write up the zone one.
So I'm just conferring with Lisa Davis. So there were some about the equity zone, and just know that that's also brand new to us. So we want to make sure those questions, we will provide those in writing, just so that it is clear, it's concise. Because again, it's new to us. So we just want to make sure that we answer those in writing. But as far as, so I'll jump in with a couple. I mean, most of them are answered, and there are still some that are coming in. Someone had asked like if there is a match. For SYP, there is not a match, so that's great. What I didn't see was no one asked about it being like the type of funding. So as of right now, this is not federally funded, so that makes our lives easier. But again, just with the emphasis that we are serving young people 16 to 24 for a 6-week program. As far as going to RFP for this program, like the following years, the way we're looking at it right now is that this will be an award from April 1st of 2022 through December 31st of 2023, based on performance and funding availability. We do have language there that could make this up to a 3rd-year contract. So just please note, like as you're going through this RFP and talking to your leadership, your executive directors, finance people, HR people, that this potentially is a 2 to 3 year contract. So I want to really make a note of that. And then Lisa Davis is going to jump in.
Yes, Evelyn, can you address how that is?
Okay, Lisa, you're gonna have to talk louder.
So essentially what I'm addressing is the One Summer Chicago program. And just for clarification, One Summer Chicago is the umbrella of the city's Summer Youth Employment Initiative. And Department of Family and Support Services historically had 3 distinctive program models: One Summer Chicago Plus, Summer Youth Employment Program, and Chicagobility. For this year in 2022, we consolidated One Summer Chicago Plus and Summer Youth Employment Program, or as we refer to it as SYEP. That's one program model. Chicagobility still exists. What we incorporated was the Chicago Youth Service Corps. Although that is a year-round program, it does have a summer component, and it does fall, all 3 programs fall under the umbrella of One Summer Chicago. So there will not be a One Summer Chicago RFP. These are the programs that fall under One Summer Chicago. So that's the clarification. Was that a good one?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell Julia the last one. Hello is the link to this slide.
Oh, and Julia, if you can do us a favor, what is the link to the slides? If you can address that.
The link to the slides will all be posted on the DFSS website.
Perfect.
And a link to the PowerPoint in this webinar as well.
Thank you kindly. I'm scrolling back up. Somebody had asked, can the agency pay the youth with a payroll system that is not ADP, or is the only option to pay them through ADP under Summer Youth Employment Program? Again, if organizations have the capacity to pay young people, then we would absolutely love that organizations pay the young people. You could use Paychecks, Paylocity, QuickBooks. I mean, those are a few that come to mind. I think there's like another IO Solutions. I've seen various ones. If you have the cash flow to pay the youth, by all means. I only mention ADP because that is the one we use for centralized payroll. So if you're an organization that opts into centralized payroll, then understand that it is ADP that we use. And we do checks and pay cards. Another good question I saw was about the vouchering, and just truly important to understand. Typically, with a year-round contract with DFSS, folks will voucher minimally at least once a month. But for SYEP, I've always encouraged folks to voucher per pay period just to ensure you have cash flow. So every time you run a payroll for your youth and your staff, I would submit a voucher. So if you're submitting 2 vouchers in 1 month or even 3 vouchers, that is okay. Our finance team understands at DFSS, as well as the city's finance team and the VATS unit, if you've ever worked with our vouchering unit. Once they see SYEP come through, and same thing for our other One Summer Chicago programs, they prioritize those vouchers. So it really flows nicely. And I will say with the iSupplier system, when we shifted a few years ago to online invoicing, it has made our finance teams and most of our agencies' lives much easier.
Here's another question. Are there any supportive programs or suggestions for new agencies that do not have the capital to voucher?
I would say look for a partner, a strong fiscal partner that could float some of the expenses. So if you're an agency that works with a fiscal partner that has a nice payroll system and can float 137,000, and then just understanding that you would handle the programmatic aspect, recruiting the young people, putting together the files and placing them. Let's just say if you're just going the traditional job placement route, I would find a strong fiscal partner that could float the program. Now, if you're an organization that, I mean, right now it's January 19, if you talk to your board about acquiring a line of credit, like I've seen some really interesting lines of credits that ranged anywhere from like $50,000 to like $2 to $3 million. And when folks have submitted that, then that's already an indication to us that folks have the fiscal capacity. And then of course, programmatically, they talk about what they plan to do. So that's another way of, if it's not a fiscal partner, then by all means, if you can get a line of credit and you have an approved letter, I mean, you can submit that as well.
Are there any other questions that you guys want to go through with our remaining time?
Yeah, we have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I know some of this we're answering online, but if there's like a burning question, like, I mean, outside of the equity zones, which we will provide in writing, other questions that you have the 3 of us here. I just saw, can you give an example of a fiscal partner? So let's say there's an organization. I don't want to call out any particular organizations because I don't want them to feel like they're on the spot. So let's just say you happen to be in a community that has, it could even be a church that has a wealth of finances. And the church is a 501c3, and you speak to the church and say, look, I have this great program. I'm housed in your community. I'm just looking to apply for this program for the next 3 years, look for a commitment, but I just need help with the finances, or as folks call it, the back end of fiscal practices. And a church could say, okay, I can work with you. We can submit the application together. They submit their audited financial statements. You write the programmatic piece, and you can apply together. Once we award, we would actually issue the award to that church because they're the fiscal partner, but then understanding that the expectation would be whatever program you outline. So I hope that's a good example of working with a fiscal partner. Is it for-profit or nonprofit organization?
Our applications are actually open to both.
Right. Thank you for that, Julia. I took a minute and I was like, actually, I mean, you could partner with a fiscal partner that is a for-profit or nonprofit. I mean, I've come across organizations that have both within their organizations. Some have a social enterprise as their for-profit, and some of them have their nonprofit. Also, to be clear, if I obtain a line of credit, I can present the approval letter as collateral. I don't think we need collateral, but if you're trying to demonstrate your finances, I wouldn't say collateral, but I would say if you have an approval, the capacity, thank you, then that would be sufficient on top of making sure you present a budget that allocates or that demonstrates what the costs are and that you understand what we're looking for and then the program that you are providing. What happens if we are unable to recruit all 50 youth?
Go from the applicant.
Excellent question. So remember that this is a 50-50 recruitment, and meaning like you're 50%. So if you're applying for 50 youth, you're responsible for 25. DFSS is responsible for 25 through the lottery. If you are struggling with recruiting your young people, then we will work with you through our lottery. And if we need to shift it, then we would help you with recruiting the young people if you're an awarded agency. Somebody's asking about the minimum number of youth students served. It's 50. If you want to go more than 50, you can you can increment by 25. And the only reason we ask for the increments of 25 is because you have staff attached to it. So if you apply for 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, etc., then at least you know, like every group of 25 youth, you'll have an adult attached to them. Can you post a link to the RFP?
I can. Every time I try to post the link or leave, like open a new window, though, I notice that the webinar screen goes down.
Okay, don't do that. I'll try to do that. Let's see. I had it up earlier. Any other questions that you see that are burning, Julia, while I'm pulling this up?
No, I mean, I think that you guys have pretty much been able to address all of the big questions. And yeah, I don't see anything that's really standing out that hasn't been addressed. And so if that is the case, I think, you know, there's a thank you, Ken, for posting a link.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been posted twice.
I think that if everybody has kind of had their questions answered and there's nothing really outstanding, you know, there's nothing new, then we'll stop the webinar now. We'll thank you all for attending. You know, just because we're not going to be doing the webinar constantly doesn't mean that you can't call or email us to ask additional questions. The next thing that goes is I'll be posting this link to a YouTube link of the webinar if you want to relive the fantastic 2 hours. And then we're going to be, a copy of the PowerPoint to the DFSS website. And then we're going to also be working on the amendment that has all of these questions and the answers that will be posted to the application as an amendment. And, keep your questions coming. So remember, save often, submit early. call or write us if you have questions, and best of luck, and we'll see you all on the 24th. Thank you so much to Lisa and Evelyn for putting together this webinar and being so thorough.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
And we look forward to reading your proposals.